3 years after our paper divorce, my 6-year-old daughter Lily walked for 2 hours through the cold streets just to find me. She gently tugged at the edge of my coat. "Mommy, I'm so hungry." My heart dropped. On the way to get her food, a post on my Snapchat suddenly flashed through my mind. It was a photo Julian had posted just a few hours ago. It was a picture of a beautifully prepared organic kids meal. His caption read, "Nothing is too good for the kids. Always homemade with love. Didn't your daddy make you dinner?" I asked, my voice trembling. Lily shook her head. "No, that was for Leo." I froze in my tracks. Leo was Celeste's son. Celeste, his first love. In that instant, the cold truth washed over me. There was never a paper divorce. He had left me for real. I pushed the menu in front of Lily, but my eyes kept drifting downward. I saw the worn-out, scuffed edges of her little sneakers. I couldn't bear to think about how she had walked such a long distance all by herself. Lily flipped to the very back of the menu and pointed to the simplest thing on the page, a small bowl of mac and cheese. My chest tightened. It physically ached. "Why only that, sweetheart? You can have whatever you want with Mommy." I thought she was just feeling distant because we hadn't seen each other in a month. Forcing a smile, I took the menu back and ordered 3 more of her favorite dishes. But Lily shook her head fearfully. "Daddy doesn't let me eat that much. He says girls need to stay skinny to look pretty." "Mommy, I was just so hungry. That's why I came to find you. Please don't tell Daddy." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with an anxiety that no 6-year-old should ever have. We had only been apart for a month. How did she become like this? My heart was bleeding. Tears blurred my vision, and I quickly began piling food into her plate to hide them. "You're only 6, baby. You need to eat to grow. Didn't Mommy send you those bags of pecans last week? If you were hungry, you should have eaten some of those." Regret hit me like a tidal wave. I should have packed her more snacks. Even some crackers would have saved her from this misery. The last time I saw her, her cheeks were chubby and rosy. Now she looked like a shadow of herself. Lily looked up and saw a tear slip down my cheek. She stood up on her chair, reaching out her tiny hand to wipe my tears away. But the moment her fingers touched my face, a cold sweat broke out across my back. I grabbed her wrist. Her tiny, delicate hands were covered in raw, healing cuts and bruises. "What happened to your hands?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but I was crumbling inside. My voice shook violently, but Lily just gave me a small, innocent smile. "I got them from shelling the pecans. Daddy said the dog would choke on the shells, so he made me shell them all and grind them into powder for the dog's food. I shelled 2 whole bags, Mommy. Aren't I strong?" She tilted her head up, waiting for my praise, but the words caught in my throat. It felt like swallowing glass. I excused myself, walked out of the restaurant, and dialed Julian's number. It rang 3 times before he finally picked up. "What is wrong with you?" I screamed. "You starve Lily and then you make her shell the pecans I sent her just to feed your damn dog? Julian, do you even deserve to be a father?" The rage I had kept locked in my chest exploded. Julian's voice on the other end was cold, indifferent. "She eats less now so she won't have to suffer through diets when she's older. I'm saving her from ending up like you, obsessing over weight every other week. And stop sending those cheap organic snacks. Who knows where they're sourced? You can't even guarantee they're clean." Before I could speak, the line went dead. He was right about one thing. Julian was a billionaire's son. He grew up in absolute luxury. Even his kids' meals were topped with caviar. But Lily didn't get caviar. She didn't even get her pecans. She had nothing. I stood there, listening to the heavy thud of my own heartbeat. I wiped my face, refusing to let my daughter see me break down. But Lily was too smart. She noticed the moment I walked back in. She lowered her fork, not daring to look me in the eye. "Mommy, is Daddy mad at me?" I forced a warm smile and stroked her hair. "No, sweetie. Daddy wants you to eat up. After this, Mommy will take you to your piano class, okay?" She was too young. I didn't want her to carry the weight of our broken family. But Lily just looked at me blankly. "The piano class? Daddy said Leo needed it more. He gave my spot to him." For a second, I couldn't process her words. That piano class was taught by a world-renowned pianist. I had pulled dozens of favors and spent months on a waiting list to get Lily in. And Julian just gave it away to Celeste's son? What kind of sick joke was this? Without wasting another second, I took Lily and drove straight to the prep school. After settling Lily in the waiting room, I stormed into the director's office. Why wasn't I notified that my daughter's spot was transferred? I signed the contract. I paid the fees. Did anyone think to ask for my consent? The administrator looked incredibly uncomfortable. Her face flushed red as she spoke softly. "Mr. Sterling arranged it personally. He specifically instructed us not to tell you." All the air left my lungs. Classic Julian. When he wanted to cover his tracks, not a single whisper would escape. I had paid thousands in tuition, only for Celeste's kid to reap the benefits. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. The administrator was just doing her job. But as I turned to leave, She called out to me. Mrs. Vance, I highly suggest you pay closer attention to Lily's mental health. She's been isolated by her classmates lately. The hesitation in her voice sent a chill straight down my spine. Lily was a sweet, gentle girl. How could she be isolated? My mind was a chaotic mess as I walked out into the hallway. And then I saw him. Julian was walking out of a classroom, holding Leo's hand. He naturally reached down to take the boy's backpack, carrying it for him. I stared dazed. I wondered if he ever smiled like that when he was with Lily. Daddy. Lily saw him too. She ran toward Julian, her little arms outstretched, desperately wanting a hug. But Julian flinched. He stepped back, avoiding her completely. An expression of pure disgust flashed across his face, as if she were a stranger. You have the wrong person, he said coldly. Lily froze. Her hands fell to her sides, her tiny fingernails digging deep into her palms. Class had just ended, and several kids gathered around, watching the scene. Look, Lily has no daddy. Even my dog has parents. Lily is unwanted. The kids' laughter echoed down the hallway. It pierced my ears. Without thinking, I rushed forward and pulled Lily tightly into my arms. Go away. All of you. I am Lily's mother. She is not unwanted. My entire body was shaking. It felt like someone had ripped a piece of my heart out. My sweet Lily. What kind of hell had she been living in? 3 years ago, to protect Julian's family assets during a massive corporate restructuring, we agreed to a legal divorce. Back then, he had held my hands and cried like a child. He promised it was just on paper. He promised that once things settled, we would remarry. He promised Lily would never suffer. Because of those promises, I waited. Year after year. But it was all a lie. Julian heard those kids mocking Lily. He heard her crying. But he turned around and walked away without a single backward glance. As Julian got into his car, I ran out and blocked his path, standing right in front of the hood. You owe me an explanation. Julian looked surprised to see me. Before rolling down his window, he carefully put noise-canceling headphones on Leo. Today isn't your scheduled visitation day, Elena. Have you forgotten how to follow rules? He didn't even look me in the eye. He leaned against his steering wheel and lit a cigarette. The smoke drifted between us, blurring his face. It felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. You're the one who broke our agreement first. I screamed, my voice cracking. Julian, you promised you would take care of Lily. What the hell are you doing to her? You starve her, you take away her classes, and you pretend she doesn't exist. She is your own daughter. I lost all control. I screamed at the top of my lungs, demanding justice for my little girl. But Julian's brow didn't even twitch. Leo has real musical talent. Letting Lily take those classes is just a waste of money. Lily's custody belongs to me. I raise her my way, and you have no right to interfere. Besides, she's alive and well, isn't she? I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. Was survival the only bare minimum he thought his daughter deserved? Do you have any idea that her arms are covered in bruises? That boy Leo. When I had pulled Lily into my arms earlier, she had whimpered in pain. That was when I noticed the dark purple bruises on her tiny arms. Leo was the one doing this to her, right under Julian's nose. But before I could finish, Julian cut me off. Enough. Don't try to throw dirt on him. Leo would never do something like that. No wonder Lily has started lying lately. She clearly learned it from you. With that, Julian started the engine, forcing me to step aside. I have things to do. He stepped on the gas and sped away, leaving me standing alone in the cold wind. He knew. Lily must have cried to him for help. But Julian chose not to believe her. He would rather believe Celeste's son than his own blood. The strength drained from my legs, and I collapsed onto the pavement. So this was what it meant to love someone else's child. Because he loved Celeste, he loved her son. And because he was done with me, Lily had to pay the price. That evening, I saw Julian again at a high-end restaurant. It turned out his important business was celebrating Leo's birthday. But he had completely forgotten. Today was Lily's birthday too. Through the glass of the private dining room, I saw Julian, Celeste, and Leo sitting together, looking like a perfect, happy family. 3 years ago, Julian had celebrated Lily's birthday just like that. He bought every single flavor of cake, because he didn't know which one she'd like best. He imported limited edition dolls and custom-made princess dresses. He had even placed a diamond necklace around my neck, whispering how grateful he was that I gave him such a beautiful daughter. Those memories felt like they happened yesterday. But in the blink of an eye, everything had changed. I was holding a takeout box of Lily's favorite food, getting ready to leave, when a cheer erupted from the private room. I turned around. Julian was presenting Leo with his birthday gifts. The boxes piled up, overflowing from the table. Then Julian pulled a black platinum card from his wallet. There's $50,000 on this. Buy whatever you want, buddy. My breath hitched. Leo gasped in excitement, but I felt like I had been doused in ice water. That card was the savings account I had set up for Lily's college fund. I could barely breathe. Celeste leaned over and kissed Julian's cheek. Julian, this is too much. It's nothing. Just pocket change. Yes, to Julian sterling, $50,000 was pocket change. One of his custom suits cost more than that. But that was money I had saved, dollar by dollar, working late-night shifts. I knew the Sterlings were incredibly wealthy, but I wanted to contribute to Lily's future. When I handed Julian that card a year ago, he had kissed my forehead and told me to rest, promising that the Sterling family would always provide for Lily. It was all a lie. My ears buzzed. I was about to storm in there and demand my card back. But suddenly, a pair of strong hands grabbed me from behind. Before I could scream, I was pinned to the floor. The bright lights of the restaurant hallway faded, and darkness took over. When I opened my eyes, I was in the back seat of Julian's SUV. He was sitting next to me. He was looking in the vanity mirror, wiping a bit of frosting from his nose. The warmth from the party hadn't fully faded from his face, and a soft smile lingered on his lips. Seeing me stir, he spoke in a casual tone. Celeste has had a hard time raising Leo alone. I just wanted to help them out a bit. Elena, don't overthink it. His tone was so indifferent. Like he had just done a minor good deed. I knew we were divorced. I had no right to care who he helped. But he had no right to touch Lily's money. I ripped the restraint cloth off my arms and threw it right at his face. Give me back the money, and give me back Lily. There was no longer any reason to leave Lily with him. If he didn't want to raise her, I would do it myself. I expected him to agree easily, but instead, Julian reached out and gently took my hand. His eyes softened. Lily is my daughter. How could I not love her? I've actually made arrangements to send her to a traditional boarding school upstate. They'll teach her discipline and domestic skills. When she's older, she can marry Leo. They'll keep it in the family. My heart stopped beating for a second. I stared at Julian, desperately searching his face for any sign of a joke. There was none. He was completely serious. Are you insane? That place is a prison. You want to throw your own daughter into a house of submission. Without thinking, I slapped him across the face. The slap echoed in the quiet car. I only regretted that I hadn't hit him harder. Julian froze. When he turned back to look at me, his eyes were dark with malice. Elena, I am not asking for your permission. Lily is lazy. She doesn't even know how to clean up after herself. How is she going to take care of Leo in the future? Sending her to vet school is for her own good. She needs to learn her place early, so she doesn't suffer later. His tone left no room for argument. Before I could scream at him again, his phone buzzed. The name Celeste popped up on the screen, accompanied by a red heart emoji. His harsh expression melted instantly. He gave the driver a quick nod. The door was opened, and I was shoved out of the car like a piece of trash. I fell hard onto the gravel road. Sharp stones sliced into my palms and arms. But as the blood began to seep through my skin, I felt no pain. I pressed my hand against the wound and walked toward my apartment. Lily was still waiting for me. Thankfully, I made it back before midnight to celebrate her birthday. After she blew out the single candle on her small cake, she looked at the clock anxiously. "Mommy, can I sleep here tonight?" she whispered. That broke me. I pulled her into a tight hug. "You're staying here tonight. And we are never going back." The small, battery-operated clock on my bedside table ticked with a steady, hollow rhythm. Tick-tick-tick. In the dark of my quiet, rented apartment, Lily lay asleep beside me. Her tiny, frail body was curled into a tight ball under the heavy cotton blanket, her breathing shallow and rapid. Even in her sleep, her fingers were still slightly clenched, her knuckles covered in the raw, red cuts from the pecan shells she had been forced to grind for Julian's dog. I sat beside her, my back resting against the cold wall, my hand gently stroking her hair. For 3 years, I had believed that our papered divorce was a noble sacrifice. I had spent 36 months living in this cramped suburban apartment, hiding my own identity as the heiress of the Vance family, believing that I was protecting Julian's corporate assets during the restructuring. I had eaten cheap bread, taken late-night translation jobs, and swallowed every ounce of my pride, all because I believed his promise that we would be a family again once. The storm passed, but there was no storm. There was only a meticulously planned trap. He had used my love to secure his assets, divorced me for real, and moved his first love, Celeste, into the very master bedroom I had decorated with my own hands. Suddenly, a loud, violent knock shattered the quiet of the night. Boom. 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 The wooden door of my apartment groaned under the force of the blows. Lily flinched in her sleep, letting out a sharp, terrified whimper as she clutched my sleeve. "Elena, open the door." Julian's voice came through the thin wood, muffled but dripping with a dangerous, icy rage. "I know she's in there. You have 10 seconds to open this door and hand over my daughter, or I will have my security team kick it off its hinges." I didn't panic. I slowly pulled the blanket over Lily's shoulders, kissed her damp forehead, and stood up. My palm, which had been sliced by the gravel when Julian's driver shoved me out of his car, was still wrapped in a clean white bandage. I felt no pain. My chest, which had been tight and aching for years, was completely still, like a placid frozen lake. I walked to the entryway, turned the brass deadbolt, and pulled the door open. Julian stood in the dimly lit hallway, his custom trench coat still damp from the night fog. Behind him stood four massive, burly security guards in dark suits, their faces expressionless under the flickering yellow lights. "Where is she?" Julian hissed, stepping into the entryway, his gray eyes bloodshot. "You took her from the school without my permission, Elena. That is kidnapping. I have the legal custody agreement signed by the court." "The custody agreement?" I let out a soft, dry laugh, my voice carrying a quiet, freezing weight that made his guards look at each other in unease. I reached into my bag on the console table, pulled out a thick yellow folder, and tossed it onto his chest. "You should look at the first page, Julian," I said. Julian caught the folder, his brow furrowing with irritation. "What is this? Another one of your childish legal threats? 3 years ago, when you had me sign the restructuring documents, you told me the divorce was just on paper." I explained, my voice flat, enunciating every single word. "But your lawyer, Mr. Cole, actually filed the unilateral petition in the Pearton family court." I took a step closer, backing him out of my entryway. "Since you had officially declared yourself assetless to avoid the corporate tax audits at the time, the court awarded the sole custody of Lily to me. The custody agreement you've been using to keep her from me for the last 3 years is a forged document, signed by an administrative clerk you paid $50,000 to alter our digital files." Julian's face went whiter than the white silk of his collar. He opened the folder, his eyes scanning the certified court stamp on the first page, his hands trembling. "No, this is a lie," he stammered, his voice dropping to a raspy, dry rattle. "My father's legal team verified the Your father's legal team is currently under investigation by the Federal Customs Board, Julian," I said, "along with your corporate restructuring files. The paper divorce you engineered to hide your assets from the Sterling Group's creditors. I have already submitted the complete financial logs to the SEC." A sudden, sharp gasp of horror escaped his throat. "And the $50,000 you stole from Lily's college fund to give to Celeste's son," I continued, my eyes locking onto his with a cold, unbending intensity. "The bank has already flagged the transaction as unauthorized asset conversion. The account has been frozen." "Elena!" Julian roared, his face turning a deep, suffocating purple. He tried to grab my wrist, but my security guard, a towering man who had been dispatched by my father's family from Cathay, stepped out from the shadows of my apartment, his hand resting on the heavy black leather of his holster. "Mr. Sterling," the guard said, his voice deep and cool, "please step back from the lady." Julian froze. He looked at the guard, then at the black luxury sedan parked under the street lamp outside. A car bearing the gold seal of the Vance Group, my family's multi-billion-dollar empire. He finally realized I was no longer the sensible, poor wife who would swallow her pride to keep his daughter fed. I was the sole heiress to the Vance empire, and the ground beneath his feet was already beginning to dissolve. The corporate and social ruin of Julian Sterling was completed by the end of the month. With the federal investigation into his restructuring fraud going public, the Sterling Group's stock prices plummeted by 70%. His father, the patriarch of the family, was forced to resign from the board of directors to protect the firm's brand, and his personal assets were frozen pending the bankruptcy audit. Rose Garden No. 1. The Malibu mansion my parents had left me was repossessed by the court bailiffs. I stood on the gravel driveway of the estate, my hands in the pockets of my dark wool trench coat, watching the moving trucks load Celeste's cheap belongings into cardboard boxes. "Elena, please." Celeste was sitting on the wet pavement near the security gate, her expensive silk gown covered in gray dust, her hair disheveled. She was clutching her son, Leo's shoulders, her face wet with tears as she looked up at me. "I didn't know," she sobbed, her voice trembling. "Julian told me the mansion was his. He said you were just a distant relative who was staying there for a while. Please, don't let them throw us out. Leo has his music exams next week." I looked down at her. I looked at her wide, tearful eyes, her fragile posture, and the complete lack of dignity in her expression. "Your son's music classes have been canceled, Celeste," I said, my voice quiet and calm. "The $50,000 Julian stole from Lily's college fund to pay his tuition has been returned to my account. And the physical abuse." I pulled out my phone, playing the audio recording of the prep school's hallway. On the screen, Leo's young voice was clear, mocking, and filled with a dark, childish cruelty. "My mom said your mom is a servant. If you don't do my homework, I'll tell my dad to lock you in the dark room again. The Child Welfare Department has already opened an investigation into your home life," I said. If I find out you've touched a single hair on Lily's head during the last 3 years, I will make sure you and your son spend the rest of your lives in a state-run shelter." Celeste's face turned a pasty, sickly yellow. She looked at her son, then at her own hands, realizing for the first time in 3 years that her savior Julian was no longer a shield. The public trials lasted for 3 months. Julian was convicted of corporate tax evasion, domestic forgery, and accessory to child neglect. He was sentenced to 5 years in the state penitentiary, his corporate assets completely liquidated to cover his outstanding debts to the Vance Group. Celeste's family name was dragged through the mud, her influencer contracts cancelled, her wealth turned to ash. A year later, the winter in Orenburg was cold, but inside my new coastal cottage the air was warm, smelling of fresh pine, sweet tea, and the rich yeasty scent of fresh bread from the bakery below. Lily sat by the fireplace, her cheeks rosy and healthy again. She was wearing a beautiful pink wool coat, her hands wrapping a clean, custom-made princess doll in a soft white blanket. She had been attending a real, prestigious music academy downtown, her talent flourishing under the care of instructors who actually loved her. "Mommy," she smiled, her eyes crinkling as she looked at me. "Can we go to the harbor to see the white boats today?" "Of course, sweetie," I said, walking over and ruffling her hair. "We'll go after lunch." As I stepped onto the porch to shake the snow from my boots, a figure stood by the iron gate. It was Julian. He looked like a ghost. He was wearing a wet, cheap coat, his face pale and sunken, his gray eyes bloodshot and hollow. He had been released on a minor bail, paid by his mother's pension, but his title, his wealth, and his family's empire were gone. He stood in front of my car door, his body shaking with the cold. "Elena," he whispered, his voice raw, broken, and completely stripped of his pride. "Please, just let me talk to you. Just for 5 minutes. I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Sterling," I said, my hand reaching for the door handle. "Move aside. I'm going home." "No." He fell to his knees on the rain-slicked pavement, his hands reaching out to grab the hem of my coat, his forehead pressing against my leather boots. "Please, Elena. Just let me hold Lily's hand once. I'll work 3 jobs. I'll give you everything. Just don't look at me like a stranger." I looked down at the most powerful man in Orenburg, kneeling in the mud at my feet, his hands clutching my shoes like a beggar waiting for scraps. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, and no pain. "The man I loved for 7 years died the night you let Leo steal her first child's fund, Julian," I said, my voice quiet and cool over the sound of the rain. "You are just someone who looks like him." I pulled my hand back, climbed into my car, and locked the door. The vehicle pulled away into the bright, clean streets of the harbor town, leaving his shadow behind in the dark. The spring in the harbor town arrived with a brilliant, golden warmth. My family's cottage was warm, the garden filled with the first blooms of the white roses my late parents had loved. I stood on the wooden porch, a warm cup of tea in my hands, watching the yellow butterflies dance over the flowers under the sun. My hands were strong, my posture relaxed, and my chest was light, free of the suffocating pressure of my past life. "Elena," my assistant Clara called out from the living room, her voice warm and professional. "The final transition files for the new logistics line have been approved. We're launching the first shipping line at noon." "Coming, Clara." I smiled, setting my cup down. I walked down the hallway, my heels making a sharp, steady, and confident sound against the polished wooden floor. I looked up at the warm blue sky, took a deep, clean breath, and stepped into the warm light of my future. I was finally truly free.